That's always tough because, like, if I'm in the car and my wife's like, oh, do you mind if I have some potato chips? I'm like, I'm not really that hungry. And then as soon as I smell it, French fries are kind of that way. I'm smelling this and going, ooh, that smells good. No, don't throw. No be throwing. We are not at a zoo. We are not at a public park throwing. Oops. Yeah. Okay, so, anyway, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Have attention, please. All quiet, please. Thank you. We're going to have a test, and I'm thinking probably, wow. Wow. Wow.
You're American. You will get everything.
Wow. You can do fun on tests. I got to test you on stuff. That way, you know, you're in a unit, you learn, and it's like, I want this unit to be over. Before it's over, you have to be tested. We'll have a test. Probably it'll be toward the end of next week. And then after that, we'll get into... Man, we're still going to be starting to... At the end of next week, we got spring break, right? And then after that, we have like, I think, 10 and a half weeks left in the year. 10 and a half. Yeah. Yeah. After, well, yeah. So, I mean, officially 12 after this week and so forth. But, you know, that last week is sort of, it ends on a Thursday, so that's like half in my mind.
You know what's crazy?
What? For a whole year, yeah. Well, we're starting to come back around, right? I'm not doing temperature checks on people anymore, right? Next, after the break, you guys will be in here, and I'm not sure when. I'm waiting to find out. You'll be with me either on an A day or a B day. Either last period of the day on the A day or third period right after lunch on B day. I'm not sure which group is which, so we'll wait and find that out. So anyway, well, you will be in here for 90 minutes. Yeah, and you'll get a longer lunch. Does what? Yeah, so you guys will be all together, and you'll be with a larger group of my 7th period on the green day. I think I went through the names of the students in there. And so I just don't know which of my 10th grade groups it's going to be. But that'll come out to you. Mrs. Anderson's getting that all ironed out, and she'll get that. She'll get to that. She will get that to you guys soon enough. Yes. The board met yesterday and made those decisions.
Oh, we're still off on Monday.
Correct. Okay? And so Tuesdays and Thursdays will be A days. 4 periods, 90 minutes long each, a longer lunch. And then Wednesdays and Fridays will be B days. Okay? Other questions? All right. Should we get back? What do you mean, what if it doesn't work out? What do you mean, what if it doesn't work out? It's got to work out. Well, then let's just hope that doesn't happen. I don't know. Hopefully, I follow the news really carefully, and most of, good, and I had heard that you were finishing up your test, and most of the shots that people are getting are so far looking like they're pretty resilient against the other strains, like there's a Brazilian strain that is not necessarily harder, but it's easier to catch, and I guess the Pfizer one is working pretty well against that. Yeah. Yep, go ahead.
One more thing. I saw from the news, you know what, like is that something that Joe Biden doing something like Trump or something like that?
Joe Biden, Trump, they're in the news, yes?
So, like, you know what that was?
No, without any more specifics. You need to give me a little bit more.
Like, Joe Biden was, like, either going to...
I know what he's talking about. I think he was, like, he's going to, like, try to bring up, like, the court documents, like, to charge him with, like...
Oh, that's not Joe Biden's job to charge Trump with, you know, whatever potential criminal violations and so forth. That could take place in a federal prosecutor, or it could be a state. Let's keep an eye on that. When you get a little bit more details, run it by me again. Okay? There's all the lawsuits. Hey, I tell you what, after the break, let's do this. Let's do a whole big, would you like that? Get that test out of the way, we'll get that test done, and we'll have a solid new unit on courts and lawsuits and all that kind of stuff, because I don't know, anybody here in the room know anything about having done anything with law? Yeah, I'll bring some of my legal background and experience and so forth into our unit on the courts and civil rights. Very, very good stuff. Yeah, it's one of the most important parts of the Constitution. So as we're racing through this last part of the Constitution, and you're like, wow, we're not spending a lot of time on civil rights, just know, yeah, you're going to be tested on just the basics, but then we'll go into more detail in our next unit. Question? Or are you just doing your hair? No. I don't know. I don't know how many school days we have. We got today, and let's make this moment together count. You ready? Let's do this. All right. Well, last we left off, we were looking at federalism, and we had Article 1, Section 9, powers denied to Congress, right? You know, and the president, of course, right? So we're going to make sure that people can't be arrested for any gosh darn reason, although it's happened a couple of times in history during the Civil War and during World War II. Do you wish to make an apology? We'll give you this opportunity.
No, you're dangerous.
The hole gets deeper. Yes, that's right. We gave you a shovel to dig out. Yep. So, yeah, the United States government obviously apologized for violating the writ of habeas corpus for Japanese Americans as well as giving money. Ex post facto laws, you got that? Bill of Attainder, got that? Direct taxes, exports, ports, wasn't too controversial. Can the government do direct taxes? Yes, because of the 16th Amendment. Okay? And then this one's kind of weird. Let me double back on this one for a moment. The Constitution, I mean, you can tell it was kind of written at the time that it was, and people are like, we're done with Britain, right? I mean, watch Hamilton. You've got the King George that comes on, and he's like going, don't you want me back? And in fact, our most famous, beloved political leader, George Washington, there were people in America that were like, let's make him king, because we don't like that other George. We want him to be king. Write this down. George Washington wisely said, no king, no royal titles. No noble titles, no dukes or earls or anything like that. None of that. That will not be part of our government, right? And if you happen to be British and you have a royal title, like, I don't know, you just had an interview on television. Who was that one that had just had an interview with Oprah on television over the weekend? Prince Harry. If Prince Harry loses his royal title, what does he become? A peasant, wow, just like the rest of us living here in America. Harry Windsor, or Mr. Harry Windsor, you know, I don't know. So we don't have those royal titles, we don't have the noble titles. It's actually pretty cool in Britain because, you know, today, you know, people are like, whatever, royal title. It is a nice thing to, if somebody does something really cool, like in science or the arts and whatever, you knight them, right? So if you had like Elton John, he's had a long career in music and so forth. Anybody know he was knighted? No. So what's his official title now?
Lady Elton.
Sir Elton John. Okay? And a female who is knighted becomes Lady so-and-so, right? So if I made the joke last time, I think you heard me say it before. Yes, what was my joke? You heard it. If Lady Gaga gets knighted in Britain, she becomes Lady Gaga. Yes. And they will have a special party for Lady Gaga Gala. Anyway, so, but I'm bummed. In here, in this country, we do like the Kennedy Center honors. Like the President of the United States will have a like big hoorah at the Kennedy Center to honor great achievements and people who've done things in the arts and music and dance and theater and movies and so forth, which is really cool. Okay? Yeah, I mean, there's things like that and so forth. The irony is that the news media, take a look at this cartoon. The news media, if someone is given responsibility over some area, whether it's like firearms or flu or junk food or tobacco, they call him the Tsar, which is a Russian royal title. That's just the news media. Their official title is like head of the office, White House office on, you know, whatever. But the news media is like, that takes too much. We'll just call him the Tsar. Okay? Is that an official government title? No, because it's unconstitutional to have a noble title or a royal title. We don't do that. That's for the English. Shall we move on? All right, let's go on to the next one. Actually, even before we get to this, let's just pause right here. Take a look at Article 1, Section 10. This is going to go by very fast. This is the Constitution denying powers to the states. So these are some of the things that the states can't do. Wow, look at this. States also, and you need to know this, federal government and the states cannot take away your writ of habeas corpus, pass ex post facto laws, no bill of attainders. We've already learned about those, right? So who can do a bill of attainder? Can the state of Idaho? No. Can the national government? No. Who can take away writ of habeas corpus? Nobody, although it happens that sometimes the Supreme Court goes, oh, there's an exception. Let's go to the next bullet point. States are not supposed to do treaties. Write that down. States are not supposed to do treaty. And we've already looked at treaties. Jana, what's a treaty? Yep, very good. And who makes treaties for the United States of America? Who signs them first? President. And then where are they ratified? By what percentage of a majority? 2/3, very good, which is why they're kind of tricky to get. But once a treaty is signed and then ratified by the Senate, it's in place, okay? So states aren't supposed to do treaties. Sometimes states will be like, we're going to make a sister state relationship with some other state in some other country, and that's fine. They can exchange actors and sports teams and, economic things and so forth. But there's no, mutual military defense treaty or things like that. Yeah. Coinage, write this down, no coinage. Who's in charge of making coins and currency and so forth? If not the individual states, then? Yeah, it's going to be the national government, okay? That's easy. No regulating trade. Ooh. So one state cannot, regulate the trade coming in out of another state? Correct. Who gets the responsibility of regulating trade among the states? The national government, okay? So states can't put tariffs on each other. And then the no noble titles part. You got that one? Okay. Nothing too exciting about there. All right, let's go to, this is an interesting one, Article 4. A lot of things in Article 4 are going to relate to how the states deal with each other. This is very interesting because we've got 50 states in our country. Oh my gosh. 50 states, and they all come up with all kinds of laws about this, that, and everything. And how is that going to work? If you go from one state to another, is what you did in one state legal in the other state? Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. All right, let's go through here. This is interesting stuff. Article 4, Section 1 is called, has contained within it the full faith and credit clause. The full faith and credit clause. Which basically means that if you have a legal status in one state, you can go into another state, and that state will give you full faith, credit for what you have in that previous state. Best example? Marriage. If you get married in the state of Idaho and you move to another state, are you still married?
No.
Yes. Okay? This is among states. This is among states. Once you get married in one state, you go to another state, you're still married as far as the laws are concerned. So, question?
What if you marry your sister in Alabama and then you're tied?
Okay, so this is an interesting thing. And actually, okay, I'm it used to, it was complicated and then became not complicated and then became complicated and then it's not complicated. There's no state right now that allows you to marry your sibling. We'll come back to that in a moment. Trust me, we will come back to that in our next unit. We will bring up Trey's things but what if I want to marry my sibling? Oh, yeah. And my cat, anyway, my refrigerator. You're oh my God. Anyway, once upon a time, you can write this down, a little history. Once upon a time, it was a little bit harder to get married in states than it is now. But there was one state that it was pretty easy to get married in. No. Nevada. Nevada. You didn't even have to live in Nevada. You could just show up in Nevada, go to Vegas, show up in Nevada, you're there, and you get married in a chapel with Elvis impersonators or something. Okay? So here's the deal. Is that Nevada marriage given full faith and credit when you go to another state? Yes. That's the whole point. Yes. Got it? Yes. Now, what about the flip side? What is it called when you unmarry officially. It's called a divorce, right? Let's say you had a marriage in another state. And then you're like, once upon a time, it was kind of hard to get a divorce. Sometimes you'd have to like prove that the person abandoned you, or that they were cruel to you, or that they cheated on you. They didn't really have like the so-called no-fault divorce. Nowadays, in most states, it's kind of like, I don't want to be married anymore, but I do. Too bad. You can still get a divorce. Nevada was the first state to have like easy divorce laws. So here's what would happen. You can write this down. This would be like in the 1950s, maybe in the 60s and so forth. Somebody in the marriage would leave that state, go live in Nevada, because they required you to live there for, I don't know, maybe a month or so, not too long. You'd go live in Nevada. You could actually stay at the Del Monte Guest Ranch with Jack Davido, manager. You can hang out at the cocktail lounge dancing and you're in Nevada long enough to qualify under Nevada law to get a divorce. So even though your spouse back in whatever home state you're in didn't want to get a divorce, you got a Nevada divorce. And was that Nevada divorce legal and binding back in the state where you got married? Yep. Now an irony occurred because you got all these unattached married people showing up in Nevada to get a divorce, and guess what happens when they're all hanging out at the same poolside waiting for the days to go by for their divorce to be active? They end up meeting somebody else. Anyway, so there you go. Okay? Nevada's smartest guest ranch. And I mean, it's fascinating. There was a little bit of a wrinkle for a while. When I first started teaching out, there was like all states' marriage laws were pretty much the same. And then some states started having same-sex marriage. That created an interesting full faith and credit issue, right? Because if you were living in Idaho, Idaho did not have same-sex marriage allowance. So if they went to like Vermont, one of the first states that allowed for that, and they got married in Vermont and then they come back to Idaho, does Idaho have to recognize that Vermont same-sex marriage if Idaho doesn't have a same-sex marriage? It was an interesting question. So let's say that there were two women, say from Idaho, they went to Vermont, got married, came back to Idaho. Would Idaho have to give full faith and credit to that Vermont marriage when those people are living in Idaho? I tell you what, it was never answered. It was never answered. I was expecting that issue to come up to the Supreme Court. It never did because the Supreme Court stepped in it. We'll see this next unit. The Supreme Court, it's been about 4 or 5 years now, the Supreme Court said that same-sex couples had a constitutional right to get married, and that applied to every single state in the country. Okay? So even though some states had adopted it through their process and others hadn't, like Idaho, the Supreme Court stepped in and said that is an equal protection constitutional right. We'll get into the details of that, like I say, in our next unit. So it's a moot question right now. Okay? Here's an interesting wrinkle. What about this? Let's say that there is a man from, I don't know, Saudi Arabia. He moves to the United States with his wife, and his wife, and his wife, and his wife. Got that? That's 4. Legal in Saudi Arabia. Are those marriages given full faith and credit in the United States? No. There are no laws, no states currently that allow for multiple marriages. You have to have one at a time. Okay? And so the full faith and credit clause only applies from state to state. It does not apply from country to country. Got that? Actually, that's my parents. My parents got married in the UK. They came over to the United States. It was given credence in the United States of America because it's a typical marriage that is allowed for in every state in the United States of America. You understand that? What if you have a bride who is 12 years old?
Ew.
Exactly. And you come to the United States of America. Is that going to be given a legal status? No, because there's no state that allows for that.
Well, only if it's a like, Japanese country.
Trey. Ixnay on the, yeah. Yep, no, I mean, they're not going to allow for that. I mean, and those things do happen, okay? All right, questions about that? Interesting. Divorce and marriage, full faith and credit. Here's an interesting thing. Take a look at this one, and I don't know how updated this is. This is a similar thing. It's the next bullet point. It's called the Privileges and Immunities Clause. And part of that Article 4, Section 2 clause has to do with if you have a privilege in one state, then you would also have that privilege in another state. And I want you to be very careful about this, because sometimes the Supreme Court will look in and go, all right, you know what? Sometimes states, if you got a privilege in one state, the other state has to give it to you. But sometimes if that state has laws that are different, because the circumstances are a little different, we're going to go ahead and say that state doesn't have to follow the same privilege that you got. And I think the driving license privilege is a good example. Take a look here on the map. Again, I don't know how accurate this is or updated this is, but I imagine it's not too far off the mark from the time that I put this slide up here. At age 14 and 3 months, get a driver's license in the state of South Dakota. Whoops. But if you moved to, I don't know, what are some of the later ones? Let's say New Jersey, where you couldn't get a driver's license until age 17. If you're a 14 and a half year old South Dakota person and you move to New Jersey, is that privilege that you had in South Dakota have to be honored by New Jersey? What do you say? Why do you say no? Why? It's in the Constitution, privilege and immunity. I got the privilege to drive in one state. Take a look, pal. It's my South Dakota driver's license. Why should New Jersey be able to tell me no? But that's just a location thing. I got my privilege here. What is so different between a 14 and a half year old and a 17-year-old?
A lot.
Is there?
Yes.
Which are more mature?
14.
Really? When do you lose your immaturity and cease to say things that are just like beyond comprehension? Tomorrow, yeah, anyway. And actually, how about this one? Because this is relevant. Are the roads and driving conditions in South Dakota any different than New Jersey? Have any of you guys been in New Jersey?
No.
Yeah. New Jersey's got a lot of turnpikes, a lot of wild roads, a lot of congestion, a lot of traffic. It's a more challenging driving circumstance altogether. Kind of like maybe California or some of the areas in Oregon and Washington, if you've been driving in those. You guys know this because you're going through that. How many of you guys have gotten your driver's license already? Nobody. How many of you guys are close to getting your driver's license? Okay? And they told you like which states you can use those in, right? Because I think Idaho, we get a little bit earlier, age 15 maybe. I don't know, is it still 15?
Yeah.
But can you drive in Oregon?
I could drive.
You have to wait a while. Okay, so there's your privileges and immunities. Is that very controversial? It's pretty basic, straightforward. It's kind of like the full faith and credit clause, but it has to do with privileges that you have as opposed to, official legal status and so forth. Okay? Next one, extradition. This is also part of Article 4, Section 2. This picture actually applies to the worldwide. I'm going to hold off on that for a moment. Extradition. If you commit a crime or are alleged to have committed a crime in Idaho, and you're like, ha, I'm just going to go to Oregon and I'll be safe. They can't stop me in Oregon and make me go back to Idaho, or can they? Yes, they can, exactly. So the point about extradition is if you're in trouble in one state and you go flee to another state, you can be sent back to Idaho. Actually, interesting question. Who's going to pay the price for flying you back or transporting you back to Idaho? Yeah. Well, what if you have no money? State of Idaho. Okay? Which creates an interesting circumstance. Here's a little piece of legal advice for you to follow. You ready? If you're driving along and you get pulled over and you get a ticket, don't just throw the ticket, crumble the ticket, and throw it in the back and never show up for court or ever deal with that ticket again. Because it could come around to haunt you. Because if you don't pay the ticket, because you're going to be guilty, right? If you don't pay the ticket, or you're going to be held responsible and so forth, there could be, let me see, if an officer pulls you over, they get this and that and so forth, and they run you up to see if there's any outstanding warrants for your arrest. Because there could be an outstanding warrant for your arrest. So here you are driving around in Alabama. You get pulled over. They run up your name, and they see there's an outstanding warrant for your arrest in Idaho. What are they going to do? They're going to arrest you. They're going to hold you until when? Can come get you. And that could take a while. And Idaho might go, I don't know that we're necessarily going to pay the cost of flying them all the way back, but you know what? We'll make that decision tomorrow. Meanwhile, you sit in jail. So take care of your business. Take care of your business. Okay? Extradition from state to state is not too controversial. Every state has slightly different laws, but it's kind of like whatever. If you're within the United States, you're going to get extradited. As a little side note, this map shows you, at least at one point in time, treaty status the United States had with other countries that we will extradite people to them and they will extradite people to us. So if you're thinking, ha-ha, I'm going to be real clever, I'm going to commit a crime, and then I'm going to get on a plane and I'm going to fly to China or Russia. Do we have an extradition treaty with China or Russia? No. So what's going to happen? You're just going to stay there. Who's the guy I think right now who's in Moscow, Russia, who we're like, we would really like to get him. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think of the guy's name. I can picture his. Not Julian Assange. I think he's in like Europe or somewhere. Can't remember. Anyway, I think it was one of the WikiLeaks guys. And yeah, so some countries don't. You can also put this down, just by way of information. Some countries, like European countries, don't have capital punishment. In fact, pretty much all the European countries don't have capital punishment. So if you're facing a charge that could have the death penalty in this country, and you're hanging on in Europe, are they going to extradite you all the way back to the United States? Probably not, unless whatever state that is says, we promise that we will not give that person the death penalty, even though it's available in our particular state. Because otherwise, that other country that we have a treaty with, they're not going to send them back. Yeah. The death penalty is, I want to say, the last I heard is in place in, I want to say, close to 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the states in this country, as well as there is a federal death penalty on some federal crimes. Okay? There's not too many countries in the world that still have the death penalty, though. So anyway, we'll come back to that in our next unit when we talk about death penalty and 8th Amendment cruel and unusual punishment. Okay? Questions about extradition? Don't break the law, so you don't have to get on an airplane and be flown back to some other country. Okay? All right, let's look at, here we go, Article 4, Section 3. Congress has the ability to deal with new states and new territories. So it's up to that particular thing. So for example, have you guys ever heard of like Greater Idaho? I need to do a slide of that. Have we talked about that? So like there's a bunch of, I don't know, there's some people living in Oregon, in some of the rural areas. And Oregon has gotten to the point now where most of the population is living in the urban areas around Portland and so forth. And so they tend to elect people that are a little bit different than maybe some of the folks in the rural areas. So some of the rural areas are like, this is terrible. We want to leave Oregon. Well, we don't want to leave, but we don't want to be part of Oregon anymore. And so they've redrawn, in their minds, they want to have like some change to create Greater Idaho. Here, let me see if I'm going to find this. I'm going to pull this up here. Okay. Here we go. Greater Idaho map. Images. Look at that. Woo! Look at that. And they actually have parts of California in there too. Anyway, so I mean, these guys are like, so yeah, just keep the more populated areas of Oregon, so that can be sort of like the chunk area of like, you know, around Eugene and Portland and so forth. And then all these rural areas that don't have as many people, that could be part of Idaho, because Idaho is pretty conservative and rural and yada, yada, yada. So, can they do that? Just like leave the country? I don't think so. Who has the authority to redraw the boundaries of the current states? Congress. Okay? Have they ever done that?
Yes.
They did it once. Okay? They did it during the Civil War when Virginia had left the Union, but the western part of Virginia, mostly mountainous, didn't have hardly any slaves there at all, because that's not really, slavery is mostly sort of flat land, plantations and so forth. West Virginia is Mountain Mama, take me home, country roads, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so Congress was like, okay, we're going to make a new state, West Virginia, the mountain state. And so they redrew the lines, and that's the way it was. Too bad, Virginia. You lose out.
So is Virginia not the Union?
Virginia's a state. It's just smaller.
Oh.
It's smaller than it was prior to the Civil War. Okay? Congress has control over the various different territories. What are the territories? Anybody know what all the territories are?
Of what?
For the United States of America.
Guam.
Guam,
Puerto Rico.
Northern Marianas, Puerto Rico.
Alaska.
Alaska is a state.
Got it, like.
It used to be a territory. It is a state. Hawaii is a state.
It's supposed to be Dominican Republic.
That is a separate country. The U.S. Virgin Islands. Yeah, the U.S. Virgin Islands in the Caribbean. So here's the deal. There is one, Puerto Rico, that might want to become a state. And some people are like, well, should Puerto Rico become a state? I don't know. What are my feelings about Puerto Rico becoming a state? For some people, it's kind of like my wall over here. Some people literally were like, I don't know, Trump should be reelected simply because otherwise Mr. Hansen's wall is going to be all mixed up. But I solved it, didn't I? I kept your sensibilities of keeping things balanced and so forth, right? Because you didn't want to deal with asymmetry, right? And as long as I'm here, you guys better hope that Joe Biden's health is holding out, because otherwise, if Kamala Harris became the 47th president, then we would have to redo the whole dang thing again. Jana's like, no! So how about it? If Puerto Rico, you can write this down. Puerto Rico, I just checked this. They had a vote not too long ago where the Puerto Rican people seemed to be taking a more clear position. In the United States of America, for quite some time, Americans are like, look, Puerto Rico, if you want to become an independent country, go for it. There's been other territories that have become independent countries. Go for it. Or if you want to become a state, that's cool too. We'll run it by Congress and so forth. Or you can just stay a territory. 3 positions. And they've all held roughly about the same number of people. But after the big hurricane they had a couple of years ago and some other concerns in Puerto Rico, more of the Puerto Rican population is now saying, let's become a state. We'll be able to get more help to deal with a lot of the things that are the Puerto Rican population is having to deal with. So you may see, prediction, write this down, maybe within the next 2 years, we may see Puerto Rico becomes a state. And what will they get if they're a state? Will they get to participate in the presidential election?
Yes.
Yep, and then it'll be some other number. I don't know how they're going to do that. I don't know. Anyway, we'll get it all figured out. Actually, no, it'll still be 538 because the members of Congress are set, and there'll be 2 senators from Puerto Rico, okay? And for the members of the House of Representatives, their population probably will give them 3, maybe 4 representatives.
What? How big is it?
It's a pretty good size. It's a pretty populated island, yeah.
So if Puerto Rico does become a U.S. state,
What?
if someone was born in Puerto Rico, could they become a president?
Good point. I would say this, because we've actually had a president that was born in a territory before it became a state. I think you would be fine with that respect. Natural born in a territory before. And even John McCain, when he was running for president, he was born in the Panama Canal Zone, which at the time was a U.S. territory. Most people looked at that and said, if you're born in a U.S. territory, that sounds like that's going to be natural born. And even if you're born in Puerto Rico today, you are a U.S. citizen. What kind of currency do they use in Puerto Rico? American dollar. Do you have to have a passport if you go from Puerto Rico to any other place in the United States? No. No. Okay? Because you're within the country. It's a territory. It's just not a state. These are some interesting designs. Do you guys like any of those 51 state designs, 51 star designs? How many guys, show of hands, this one right here. This one? This one? Okay, like that's cool. How about that one? Like that kind of the hexagon thing? Well, that one.
No.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. How about that one?
No.
All right, I got a winner for you. You ready? This has got 51 stars. There we go. The Pac-Man proposal. Anyway, all right. I don't know. Whatever. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Article 4, Section 4. Basically, all this says is every state has to have a Republican government. Now, we're not talking Republican Party. In other words, no state can go, like some of you guys were doing earlier in the year when I gave you the democracy dictatorship choice. You can't up and declare yourself a dictatorship. Every state is guaranteed a Republican form of government. And if one state tries to declare itself a dictatorship, who's going to step in and stop that? The federal government, yeah, with the President of the United States and so forth. Can states, what's that? Well, then that's another issue altogether and so forth, yeah. We're not supposed to have a dictatorship in the federal government either. Hello. What about, can one state just kind of get up and leave? I mean, there's various different ones. Texas is an interesting one because they were independent as a country for a brief period of time, and they voluntarily joined. The original 13 states voluntarily joined and signed on to the United States of America. But even those ones, Texas and Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, when they tried to secede from the Union at the beginning of the Civil War, President Lincoln and the United States Congress were like, no, can't do. You're going to have to stay. If a state or territory is going to leave, who, Ava, would have to give permission for them to leave? Starts with a C, rhymes with Congress. Yes, that would be the one. And probably going to need a presidential signature on that one, too.
Have any government officials actually considered the Greater Idaho?
You know, it's interesting because the guy who's behind that in Oregon, they've been having little votes in different parts of the counties and so forth. So, I mean, it's kind of the idea that, wow, you know, we need to be treated better, yada, 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 yada. But they haven't gotten to the point of actually proposing it to the United States Congress, and I don't think they will unless they get like a wave of support among Oregonians in those parts. But yeah, but can you imagine Idaho having a coast on the Pacific? That'd be pretty cool. Yeah, we were staying on the southwest Oregon coast last summer, and we're like, wow, we could be in Idaho. Just kidding. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. Okay. Actually, it's some parts of it there. All right, so here we go. Article 5. Oh my gosh, amending the Constitution. There actually is multiple ways of getting the proposal and the ratification, right? This is the most common way. In fact, it's the only way for the 27 amendments. 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, right? We've been through that litany before. This one's a little sketchy right here. 2/3 vote of a national convention called by Congress on request of 2/3 of the state legislatures. So if the state legislatures are like, we need to have a constitutional convention, let's have one. Can you imagine what the going on right now? And we're like rewriting like the entire Constitution.
Oh my goodness.
Ooh, that would be tense. Yeah, so we haven't quite gotten to that one. Usually if there's an idea, it gets started right here. And then it's kicked out to the states. 26 times, 3/4 of the states went along with their legislature. So the regular group of people who are serving that state government. One time, state conventions gathered to repeal prohibition. So that was the 21st Amendment. So that one got kicked out to all the different state conventions that were called specifically for the purpose of whether or not they were going to keep prohibition or get rid of it. Okay? Does that make sense? By the way, what is prohibition? Yeah, the ban of manufacturing alcohol, distributing alcohol, selling alcohol. It actually doesn't ban alcohol, but it does pretty much everything associated with alcohol. But it doesn't ban drinking of alcohol. So you're like, well, I don't know where this came from and so forth. So anyway, that was a federal law. Okay? Questions about that? Amending the Constitution? Fifth Amendment. Okay? Article 6. Oh my gosh, we're almost done with the Articles of the United States Constitution. Wow, we're going to be done with the Constitution when we're done with the Articles of the Constitution? No, then we get to start into the amendments. Okay? Which is cool, because the amendments are really, really cool. All kinds of good stuff. We kind of already looked at this idea. Article 6 is very important. One component is assumption of public debt. In fact, this was a real big reason why the Constitution was done back in the day, because the United States government, under such luminaries, as John Hanson and these other presidents of the Congress and so forth, we were heavily into debt. And do we have a way of raising money? No. We couldn't raise taxes. We couldn't borrow. We're just going to the states going, please, can we have some money? So Article 6 said all that previous national debt, we'll take it. Wouldn't you like that? If you accumulate some debt in your life for whatever purpose, if somebody just come along and go, I will take your debt. Don't worry about it. I got you back. Wouldn't you like that? Just be careful of what they're asking for in exchange. But this, the United States Constitution says, the United States government is going to pay off all those loans that were taken out, particularly during the American Revolution, which is very important because a lot of those hadn't been paid. And there is the long view of the accumulated debt. And I think this is as a percentage of our gross domestic product. Yeah, as in the total amount of the economy for a given year. Obviously, we borrowed a lot of money, World War II, but we were able to get that debt down. But it's been growing up, and I think that's actually not unrealistic. Literally, one of the ways that people are looking now, as far as let me see, what are we going to do in order to make sure that there's enough money going to those expensive programs like Social Security? Yeah, just raise taxes on all the young people. Raise your hands if you want to pay more taxes, a higher tax percentage than your parents do. Wow. Okay. Here's another thing that actually might help reduce an individual's tax burden. Have more people. Just have more babies. Just have more babies. Because babies become young adults, and young adults work, and they work for a long time, and they pay taxes. But if they don't have babies and so forth, then the population gets older and older and older and older, and who's going to support that older population? Yeah, not as many people. During COVID, over the last year, what's it been, about a year? The number of births has actually fallen off more during that one particular year, this last year, than I think in a long, long time. So people aren't getting together and making babies, yes?
Hey, so I have a great idea. How about we just triple the taxes on millennials in California?
Okay, there we go. Interesting idea.
Sounds like good.
Interesting idea, yes. Michael?
If you think about it, you just have to increase, so for example, like Montana, you don't have to pay taxes,
You have to pay taxes in Montana.
In Idaho, you have a 26.
There's a variety of different types of taxes. In Idaho, you pay sales tax. You pay income tax. You pay property tax. Some states don't have those. I'm going to say Oregon, I don't think they pay sales tax. Oh, that's cool. But they pay higher income tax, property tax, and so forth in order to balance things out. Okay? Supremacy Clause. There we go. Article 6, Section 2. This one sorts out when there is a problem. Oh, is it time? Well, then we're just going to have to wrap this up. All right, we're done. Yeah, we'll come back to the Supremacy Clause next time. Yeah, no religious test, 11th Amendment, and then we'll get into the First Amendment, yada, yada, yada. Okay? I'm thinking probably we're going to end up with a test then on Thursday of next week for you guys. Okay? Are you good? All right. Well done. Okay.